like to welcome everyone to Turning Left for Less next interview. Today we've got Jonathan Samuels, who's a Sky TV presenter. He's got a long history as a news reporter and used to work for the BBC. So thank you, Jonathan, for joining us today.
Well, it's a pleasure, Michelle. Thank you for having me, and it's exciting. I mean, I've followed your blog and what you do for quite a while now, and it's great. I think, especially when money's tight for everybody, and we're all looking at ways of doing things a little bit cheaper, and the hacks that you offer, and the ideas that you've got, and the use of points and the tips you give us all are much appreciated. Well done.
Thank you. Well, that kind of takes me back to how I first met Jonathan not that long ago. We were at a dinner for a tourist board, because Jonathan's side hustle is travel writing, hence why he's here today. And I kind of looked at his name tag on the table next to me and thought, that name sounds awfully familiar. And I looked at him and thought, I recognise you. And then I suddenly realised that he followed me on Twitter. But I was expecting to be the one that was starstruck. But in fact, Jonathan was so enthusiastic about meeting me, I was actually quite embarrassed, because he was so happy to meet me. So it was quite a funny first meeting, and not quite what I expected, but it was lovely to meet you.
Yeah, we had a nice evening, didn't we? And the thing about me, Michelle, is that I'm very good at asking questions, and that's why I felt like I gave you a bit of an interview when we were sat next to each other. I'm not very good at answering them, so goodness knows how this is going to go.
Well, we'll give it a go. So I thought I'd start with kind of going back to the beginning. And did you have a fascination with travel when you were younger? Did you ever think about being a pilot? What kind of got you into being passionate about traveling?
Well, I remember vividly my very first flight, and I must have been 9 or 10. I was a tiny little boy, and we had a wedding to go to in Belfast. And of course, this was during all the Troubles. But the first flight was from Manchester to Belfast. And I went with my parents. And right from the beginning, right from arriving at the airport, I was just engrossed in this world. And it was just, I can remember the feeling now of walking up the steps of the aircraft for the very first time and smelling the aviation fuel, settling down in my seat. And it was a British Airways flight, and the crew were great because I think they could see my wide eyes and my excitement. And they even asked if I'd like to go and see the pilot during the flight. And obviously it's only a short flight, but I went into the cockpit in the days when, of course, you could go into the cockpit when the plane was still in the air, and they made a fuss of me in there as well. And it was really that flight which got me so engrossed in the world of aviation, but not only the world of aviation, but also the world of travel as well. And I've traveled the world since, both professionally and personally, and I sort of can't get enough of it. You know, I love airports. If a plane gets delayed, I'm actually not that bothered, because I love spending time in airports. And I lived in Australia for a few years. I was a foreign correspondent based in Sydney, and used to do the flight backwards and forwards from Australia to the UK. And at the end of the 22 hours, I was probably the only person on the plane sort of slightly disappointed that we had to get off, especially if you're flying without kids and without your family. If you're on your own, you're cocooned in your seat. They bring you this wonderful food and drink. You catch up on all the films that you've not seen. I mean, for me, that is heaven. So I think I've always been excited by air travel. And we live in West London, not very far from Heathrow. So of course the planes are part of our lives. And my son, who's now 12, is also quite into aircraft. And occasionally, Michelle, and don't tell too many people about this because it's a bit embarrassing. You go to Myrtle Avenue, you know, famous Myrtle Avenue, just outside the border of Heathrow,
corner, yes.
And watch the planes coming in, and then do that for about an hour, and then we go to McDonald's for lunch. But you know, I don't tell too many people. But I know you're in the circle of trust, so we're okay. We're okay. People who are watching this will understand that.
Yes. Let's hope so.
Yeah.
So you've obviously had a lot of great experiences, and some really unusual ones when you were abroad and reporting on various news articles. What is your most memorable travel experience?
Oh gosh, there are so many, and the great thing about being a reporter, a journalist that gets to travel, is that you have some really weird and wonderful experiences. Both, you know, on commercial aircraft, but also I've done some other stuff on sort of private planes, which has been really fascinating as well. Probably the the most amazing flight I've ever had, which might terrify some people, was on a RAF Hercules going into Basra. And they do this thing, which I'm sure you know about from your career, Michelle, where they do what's known as a corkscrew landing. So you're in the Hercules, it's not very comfortable, you're all sort of on the walls, strapped in. And they fly at a high altitude over the airbase. And then rather than coming in like in a smooth sort of normal way, they basically drop out of the sky and do this sort of weird corkscrew style maneuver to land to avoid anti-aircraft. So it was an amazing experience. And then after we'd done our filming and spent a few days with the army and done our stuff, we then came home and we went back into the Hercules. And by chance, the pilot was a friend of mine, and he'd heard that I'd been on the base. And he said, look, what do you want to sit up at the front with us? And I was like, I mean, come on, this is like a dream come true. So I sat in the cockpit, and all the lights are off because obviously they want to minimize the chance of being shot at. You always take off at night time, all the lights are off. So we put on night vision goggles. I was in the cockpit, this Hercules with night vision goggles, flying back to safety, and that was remarkable. So I've had some fun with the RAF. In fact, probably my worst flight was with the RAF as well. I was in an AWAC, and it was during the Winter Olympics, which were being held in Italy. This is going back quite a while now, and we'd been offered this chance to go on the AWAC just to do a feature really about how they patrol the skies, make sure everything is calm. It wasn't long after 9/11. And we thought, yeah, this would be fun. This would be a nice feature. So we went up in the AWAC, took off for an air base in Italy. It was going well, and I'd done a few interviews, and I was chatting to one of the senior officers on board about how it all worked, how they monitor the skies for any traffic that shouldn't be there. And suddenly there was this really strong burning smell. And just as I was about to say to this guy I was interviewing, what's that smell? The pilot comes on and says, right, everyone back to their seats immediately. So everyone rushes back to their seats. The masks drop, full masks drop, put those on. The smell is getting worse. A couple of the guys are dressed in full firefighting gear, looking around like this. And I think, well, this is it. This is my moment when it's all going to end. And with the AWAC, there are no windows, so you can't look out of the window and see if the engines are on fire or anything. And because it wasn't a commercial flight, the pilot wasn't really telling us what was going on either. So I was there clutching the side of my seat, and the cameraman was next to me. And I said to the cameraman, I think we should probably record a piece to camera. And he was like, what are you talking about? We're in an emergency. And I said, well, I think we should do it just in case. So I did a little piece to camera saying, it's the moment every air passenger dreads when the masks drop and all the rest of it. And then suddenly we started going down like this. It was a bit like in the Hercules, like literally dropping out of the sky. And I was thinking, well, we're going to hit the mountains, this is it. And then after a few minutes, thankfully, we landed. Had to go down the chute, which was an experience. So jumped down the chute, a runway full of fire trucks and fire engines and ambulances. And what had happened is that there'd been an electrical fire underneath the flooring. And of course, there's so many wires underneath the floor that it's actually very hard to get to. But they from the instrument panel, they knew that there was a problem. So we all got off, we were all fine, and that was that. And we actually had a much better story than just a nice sort of feature going round. But one thing that's interesting, Michelle, and I'm not a superstitious person, but I always tap the outside of the plane when I get on a plane. I always just tap just to sort of acquaint myself with the aircraft, make sure that we're all okay, and then go and sit down. It's just a little superstition I have. It's the only superstition I have. And of course, because I was being filmed going up the steps and going into the plane this time, I forgot to tap the plane. The one time I forgot to tap the plane, we have a full-on emergency. Yep. So I think there's a lesson there for you. So I've had lots of great, I know. I have had lots of great experiences through work, but also personally as well. There are so many fun things. The seaplanes in the Maldives. I mean, that was a great experience. Flying low over the ocean with those pilots who don't wear shoes. That was fantastic. And then I don't know if you did this, but one of the best experiences on a commercial aircraft was when we didn't even take off, and there's I think it was a couple of years ago now, where Virgin said goodbye to their very last 747, and they invited members of the public for one day to come on board and have dinner in upper class, sit in the engine casing, explore behind the scenes, in the cockpit and also the crew rest area, go inside the hold where all the bags are normally kept. And the day before, they let journalists do the same thing. And that was just fantastic, exploring the probably my favorite aircraft, the 747, going behind the scenes, taking photos. So that was great fun as we said goodbye to the Queen of the Skies.
Yeah, sadly I missed that one, but that was my favourite aircraft, the 747. I saw the last British Airways one take off from Heathrow, and I had a bit of a tear in my eye. It really was the end of an era.
Yeah,
it's sad that that's probably, well, in fact they've made the last one now, haven't they? In the last week or so, the last one came off the production line.
Yeah, and occasionally you do see them, don't you? Lufthansa or a cargo plane,
Yeah.
which is always a nice sight.
So do you have a particular, other than flying with the military, which sounds quite hair-raising, do you have a particular airline that you like to fly with, or a particular destination that's one of your favourites?
I mean, I have a love-hate relationship with most airlines, I think, like a lot of us do. I'm probably flying British Airways the most. And, I'm a keen sort of Avios collector. And when airways are at their best, then I think it's fantastic. If you have a good flight and the crew are on form and everything comes as it should, and your bags arrive on time, then I think they're a fantastic airline. And I will always support them to the hilt, really, because it's very difficult being a legacy airline, as you know, in these days, and especially when you're competing with the Middle Eastern carriers. So and the same goes for Virgin as well, but it can be a little bit hit and miss with both those airlines. But when it goes well, I do find that it goes really well. And the same is true of budget airlines. If you buy a really cheap ticket on Ryanair and everything goes according to plan and you're on time and you don't feel that you've been sort of ripped off with bags or whatever, then it's great. You can't beat it. But if things go wrong, you do get a bit sort of wound up. I had a bad experience with Wizz Air recently, which was very frustrating, where I paid a bit more for the online check-in. And then when I got to the airport in Rome, I think it was, they said, oh, there's no online check-in, and there was a huge queue. And then I tried to get a refund for the online check-in, and they said, oh no, there's no refund. And you just feel a bit annoyed and a bit angry. So I think a lot of it is down to experience on the day. But I love Qantas were great. When I used to fly Qantas quite a lot, I love Singapore. And in terms of airports, actually, I have a great relationship with T5, and because I live, as I said, quite near Heathrow in West London, my record is literally getting out of bed and sipping a cappuccino in the galleries lounge in 50 minutes. Now, not many people can do that. And when that works, it's brilliant when you speed through, check in and all the rest of it. And then some of the tiny, I've been to some weird and wonderful airports. Have you ever flown to Barra in the Scottish Hebrides, Michelle? Do you know Barra?
No, but that's on the bucket list for 2023. I definitely want to do that one.
Let me know and I'll come with you, because it's amazing. So Barra is this tiny island, beautiful island in the Outer Hebrides. And I think I'm right in saying that it's the only airport in the world where the aircraft's timetable is governed by the tides, because the planes land on the beach when the sea is out. So you have this wonderful view coming into land of the island, and then you come down and you land on the beach and everyone gets off, and then there's a quick turnaround before the sea comes in so it can take off again. And when you check in Barra to fly back to the mainland, you wear your bags and you have to stand on the scales as well, because the plane can't be too heavy or it'll sink into the sand. So that's a fantastic experience. So yes, let me know when you go.
Yeah, I definitely want to do that. That kind of reminds me of saying the only airport in the world with the tides. I remember flying on a seaplane into Vancouver Island to Victoria, and words I've never heard before on air traffic control was "caution whales on the runway." You don't hear that very often.
Really?
That was a good one for me. But yeah, I really want to do Barra. It sounds something completely different. So Jonathan, you've told me a little bit about your past travel, but we haven't really touched much on what you've done recently. Can you tell me a bit about how your travel's been in 2022? Obviously, there's been quite a lot of issues with airports, although at least things have started to go back to normal. So what have you been up to this year?
Yeah, well, we as a family, we had a couple of trips. We went to Rome a long weekend, and we also went to Turkey in the summer for a fortnight. And it was so nice having no paperwork to fill out, no test to do either here or at the other end. It's like a weight lifted off your shoulders, and it really was quite liberating being able to travel like we used to in the old days. And we flew with BA both times, and it was great, really good service. Our bags arrived, no problems. For work, I went to cover the hurricane in Florida. Do you remember Hurricane Ian not so long ago, which was quite a big story to cover at the time, and I was there for a few days. Flew from Heathrow to New York, down to Jacksonville. We spent a few days in Florida, and then flew back with American Airlines to Heathrow from Miami. And Michelle, you'll never guess what happened on the return leg. I was downgraded. Downgraded. We were sat on the sat on the tarmac in Miami, and we had business seats for work because of the flexibility largely, but also because we have a lot of equipment, TV equipment. It comes included, and you don't have to pay excess baggage. But we were sat for about an hour, and the pilot was saying there's a bit of an issue, there's a problem. The engineers are looking at it. And then we started moving. I was, great, this is good, we're taxiing. And the pilot comes on and said, we're actually going back to the port. We can't sort it. Everyone disembarked, deplaned, as they say in America. And he said, the good news is there's another plane waiting. So we went to the other gate, but of course it was a smaller aircraft. It was the smaller 777. So a lot of us were downgraded so I downgraded to economy, but weirdly economy wasn't that busy. So I managed to get 4 seats. And I lay down flat on the 4 seats, and I actually had the best night's sleep I've ever had on an aircraft. So arrived feeling really refreshed, which was quite weird. And then the other trip I did this year, which was fantastic, and I know you'll appreciate this one. I had quite a big birthday, and for my birthday, I wanted to go to New York, and I went with my wife, and I said, for the first night, I'd like to stay at the airport. And she's like, what are you talking about? We're going to Manhattan, you want to stay at the airport? Are you mad? And of course, I wanted to stay at the TWA hotel, which many of your viewers and readers will know that it's in the old TWA terminal at JFK, and they've turned it into this amazing retro 60s hotel, and it is fantastic. And it was a really, really good experience, apart from the fact that when we woke up the next morning, we started getting texts saying that the Queen was very ill and Prince Charles going up to Balmoral. And so that was quite sad. But my wife, a few days earlier, had become the royal correspondent for Sky News. And she looked at me and I looked at her, and she said, you know what this means, don't you? And I said, yeah, we've got to go home, haven't we? And she said, yes. So we didn't really even leave the airport. We had to get a plane and come straight back to London. And then, of course, it was non-stop work for the Queen's funeral. So that was an experience which started off brilliantly and then ended rather sadly. Yeah. So yeah, it's been quite a year.
Well, at least you got to stay at the TWA hotel, which is definitely an experience, like walking back in time. Did you get to swim in the rooftop pool? Were you brave enough to swim in the pool?
Yeah, we got up there really early, and we did, and we swam, and we watched the planes take off. I mean, it's a plane spotter's dream, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I did that. Even I just went in at the end of November. It was absolutely freezing and blowing a gale, but I was determined I was getting in that pool. It was lovely and warm, actually. It was really good after a long flight to jump in there.
And also nice to have a cocktail on the Constellation that's outside, and they've turned it into a bar, and that's really good fun as well. Yes, it's a really unique hotel. Personally, I think as a hotel room itself, it's not particularly anything special, but everything else, it's worth visiting even if you don't stay there, I think. Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it really is. It's a real experience. It's good fun. So I also know that you've done something that a lot of Turning Left for Less readers will be familiar with recently, a tier point run to Sofia, I believe. Well, so now when we met, I was talking to you about this, wasn't I? And I was considering doing it, and I did go to Sofia, and I actually went to do some work. I went to do a travel article about going to Sofia for the weekend, the capital of Bulgaria, of course. And actually, it's a great city to go to because it's such good value compared to any other European capital. Sofia is about half the price you would spend on accommodation, on food, on drinks, and there's also quite a lot of stuff to do for free. So it's a great little city, actually, if you wanted a cheap weekend away. and I was going to do a tier point run, and then in the end I decided not to, for two reasons. One was that even with that, I still wouldn't have enough points to sort of tip me over what I needed. And also part of me, and this might be a bit controversial, but part of me did feel, environmentally, is this a good thing to be doing, to be spending quite a lot of money going and then turning around and coming back? But having said that, a lot of people were doing it, because in fact so many people were doing it that the cabin crew was sort of making fun of it on the tannoy. So when they came on, they said, great to see so many of our frequent flyers, some of you seeing for the second time in just one day. Chuckles from the front of the plane. And it did make me think, and I don't know if you've got a view on this, Michelle, but would BA be sensible to say to people, that small community of people that do tier point runs, look, we know you want to do this, we understand why you want to do it, but if you pay us, if you give us the price of the fare, you don't actually have to do the journey, or we'll even give you a little discount. We'll give you 10% off the price of the fare that gets you to your points, but you don't, the tier points, but you don't have to. Do you think, would they ever do that?
I think it's unlikely, although in America, obviously, they've now got on American Airlines a credit card that does give you some credit towards status.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I kind of agree with you in terms of flying for the sake of it, just to turn around and come back again. But probably not just the environmental reasons, but why would you not go and explore the city? Even if you've been before, I think there's always something new you can see. So I'll tend to go to places more than once and just do a little bit at a time rather than trying to rush around and see everything. So I do tier point runs in the terms of I will maximize what I'm booking to get the most, but I would never just land and come back again. Very rarely, I think occasionally with a cheap fare where you need to position somewhere. In the old days, I would very occasionally do what they call a back-to-back, but generally I like to just go and see the city. And because I can work from anywhere, I'm lucky enough to have the time. I think the other point about tier point runs is a lot of people actually fly because they love flying, a bit like you've been saying. It's not just the tier points. They're actually happy just sitting on the plane and enjoying the lounges and just, for them, it's like a day out. I know a lot of people that will literally just fly somewhere for one night just because they like flying more than anything. So I think there's a lot of different sort of levels to how people do tier points and why they do them.
Yeah, exactly. And I wouldn't ever criticize anyone for doing it, but it certainly crossed my mind, and in the end I decided not to. Having said that, when we went to New York, I did book the flights from Dublin to avoid the taxes and fares and charges, and I felt quite bad about that because it would have meant a flight to Dublin, which I didn't really need to take. I was only doing it to save quite a lot of money, quite a few £100s actually. But by pure chance, Michelle, they cancelled that leg. So I phoned up and I said, I was only doing this to save money on the taxes and the fees. You've cancelled it. Can I still have the discount on the Heathrow leg? And they actually said yes, which was great. So I got the discount without having to do the Dublin leg, which was quite good.
That is one of the advantages at the moment, is that with so many cancellations, if you have done that, a lot of the time they will just let you start from London. So sometimes cancellations can be a good thing, just not when you've already got to Dublin and then they cancel the flight back. But yeah, I totally get your point. But I think there are ways you can quite often fly actually from Dublin direct to the US with American, for example. So there are ways people want to be more sort of very conscious of the environment, then they can actually still get that discount. But I think until the UK stops being so ridiculously expensive for flights compared with places like Dublin, then it's kind of inevitable that people will want to do it. I mean, I at the moment can see you probably make a good £1,000 saving, absolute minimum, on a lot of fares to the US by flying from Dublin. So why wouldn't you?
I know, and it does seem very odd, doesn't it, for airlines that want to be seen to be green and doing the right thing, that they're sort of actively encouraging people to do extra flying, which is sort of frustrating.
Yeah, particularly with, I find it interesting with Ireland in that it's generally quite expensive anyway. It's probably at least parallel with the UK, if not more expensive for most other things. Yet for some reason, prices for flights are cheaper. I think partly because a lot of them come back via the UK, so they're obviously competing with direct fares. But even a lot of the American direct fares are actually much cheaper than flying from the UK.
Yes, good point. Yeah, that's a good point. This is why your knowledge is invaluable, Michelle. You see, this is all the stuff we love.
So we've talked a bit about your main career, but your side hustle in travel writing. What got you into that?
Well, I suppose because I used to be a correspondent and travel the world following news stories, whether it was sort of earthquakes or royal tours or terror attacks or whatever it was. I used to do a lot of travel, and I was away most weeks somewhere. And then I went into the studio and became a presenter about 5 or 6 years ago, but really missed the travel. And I still do a little bit of travel when they want a presenter on location, but not as much as I used to. So I thought, well, how can I combine my love of travel with also still being able to do a bit of writing and a bit of work, and travel writing fits the bill perfectly. So I do a few travel articles every year, and luckily I've been able to get published in some of the British newspapers, the Times and the Telegraph and the Sun, that sort of thing. And it means that I can sort of, rather than having to go where the news story is, I can go where I actually want to go. So I choose places that I'd like to visit, try and find an interesting sort of news angle or feature angle which will appeal to the newspaper editors, and I've been lucky enough to sort of get a few really nice trips, and it's just a great way of seeing different places. So for Sofia, for example, I was only there for 48 hours, but managed to do lots of great things and try different restaurants and cafes, and went on a couple of tours around the city to make sure that I'd seen all the right sites, and then that will appear in the Sunday Times in the not too distant future. So it's great fun. So I don't do it a lot because I can only do it obviously when I'm not working doing main job, but it's a fun little sort of hobby.
Well, I'll definitely share that article when it comes out, because obviously that might be of use to people that want to get their
Yeah.
cheap tier point weekend in. I mean, when I write about tier point runs, I do generally do it as a tier point break. So to say what to see when you're there, to try and encourage people to actually make the most of it. Since I know some people that actually go to Hawaii and literally turn around at the airport and come back again, which just breaks my heart.
So it seems so wrong, doesn't it?
Yes, it's just so wrong, because I love Hawaii. So is there anywhere that you haven't written about yet that you'd absolutely love to write about?
Oh gosh, so many places. There's a hotel I really want to stay in Indonesia, in Langkawi. Have you ever stayed in the Datai? I don't know if you know
I
that.
have, and I've written about it. It's an amazing hotel. It's really special, something very unique.
And they're doing incredible work to really give back to their community as well. They're helping to fund the local school. They employ people to look after the wildlife, because they're right under the canopy of the rainforest, but also next to the ocean. And they're doing work to try and regenerate coral in the sea, and creating the pathways for animals to be able to cross roads without physically risking their lives crossing the physical road. They're in the canopy above the road. So they're doing a lot of that sort of great work. And this policy of having zero waste, sending nothing to landfill, which is amazing, isn't it, for a hotel? Even the wine bottles are crushed to dust. Or they've built buildings out of old wine bottles. It's amazing what they're doing. Plus, it's a beautiful, luxurious place to stay. So I'm hoping to go there potentially. We're going skiing to Austria in February, which was cancelled because of COVID. So that's been postponed. So we're looking forward to that. And then we might do a sort of little holiday to Croatia. I'd love to go to Croatia. I've not been there for sort of 20 years. So I might take the family there in the summer. So yeah, lots of plans.
Sounds good. So is there, just to kind of wrap up the interview, is there any tips in all your years of frequent travel that you think that maybe my readers would benefit from?
Well, I think all your readers know all the tricks and tips already, and I'm still learning. I find myself, I wake up in the morning and I check my phone, and your email comes through, and I start reading, and then I sort of have to sort of stop myself. Well, what am I doing? I'm meant to be getting up and going to work, and here I am reading a review of business class seats of American, or this is what you need to do to maximise your happiness. And I'm thinking, come on, I've got to get up and get going. So I think your view, there's not much I can tell your readers, but I do think the credit card thing is really useful. I mean, I have built up a lot of points simply by signing up to credit cards and just keeping across who's got the best offers, and changing credit cards quite frequently. And I'm quite disciplined. I've always been quite disciplined with credit cards, sort of paying off the balance and all the rest of it every month, so that you don't incur any charges. And actually you're getting credit cards to give you things rather than traditionally the other way round. So I'm quite hot on that. And also,
what about things like packing? I'm assuming, are you a hand luggage only kind of guy?
Well, when I went to Sofia, I did take hand luggage only, and we thought initially we were going to go with Ryanair, and they're really strict. So it's like literally a sort of tiny bag with the seat in front of you. And in the end, our plans changed. We went with BA, but I still kept the baggage the same. And it's amazing how much stuff you can actually get in a small bag. So this was actually a bit of a revelation to me, because normally if I do hand luggage, I'm a sort of case, the biggest case you're allowed in the overhead cabin, whereas this time I just had a tiny rucksack, and you can get more than enough for 2 or 3 days away in hand baggage. And in fact, when we went to New York, we took luggage as well. I've even been to Australia and back with hand luggage, and when I checked in, the person was like, well, where are your bags? And I said, oh, I'm just hand luggage. And she thought I was mad, but I was going to cover the bushfires a few years ago, and managed to just take hand luggage so we could get out of the airport really quickly and go and start covering the story. So yes, I think that's been a bit of a revelation to me, realizing how little you actually need when you're away and how much you can get in a small bag. I'll tell you what I would like to see improve, and that is online check-in. It's great in the UK, especially with the British Airways app. You can check in online and sail through. But when you're abroad, I've noticed this a lot on holiday. Coming back is a problem, where they say you've got online check-in, and when you get to the airport, it doesn't exist, and you have to queue up, and it's all quite tedious. And I wonder why that's still the situation in the world that we live in, where we're all using our phones all the time.
Yeah, it seems to be more of a European thing. I generally find in the US and Asia they're pretty hot on it, but yeah, there's a lot of places still. Yeah, where you have to queue up, which is just a waste of everybody's time, and also it causes them to have to pay for more staff potentially. So it does seem ridiculous in the current day. Hopefully, I think part of it's because during the pandemic people stopped investing in technology because nobody knew what was going to happen. So I think now in the next couple of years that things will start to really ramp up, as we've obviously seen travel come back almost to pre-pandemic levels. I think and hope that will definitely improve, because they're more conscious than ever about staffing costs and of queues, etc.
Yeah, exactly. I think lots of things are going to change. I mean, it's not great seeing those huge piles of bags again at Heathrow in the last day or two, is it? But again, let's hope that staffing levels improve and all the rest of it, because we need to get back to normal, don't we?
Absolutely. I think it's such a shame that the last year has been marred by all the staffing problems, when we're all really looking forward to getting back to what we would view as normal travel, but in fact it's still not really normal because of all the issues in airports. We can only hope that 2023 is better.
Yeah, exactly. Fingers crossed.
So Jonathan, we've been talking a bit about how you've got back to travelling in this year and how things have gone a bit more back to normal. How did you find the pandemic? Did you travel during that?
Well, back in March 2020, you remember that the virus suddenly started becoming a story, and then Italy went and locked down half their country, and we were all like, what are they doing? This is so Italian to overreact. But because it was a story, they sent me to Rome to cover it, and we were live in Rome talking about this lockdown that was taking place. And then we went out for pizza with the crew, and we were having dinner, and we got a text saying the whole of Italy's gone into lockdown. This is unbelievable. So we rushed back to the hotel roof, we fired up the cameras, and we were talking about the whole of Italy being locked down. It was back in the newsroom, they were beginning to get quite concerned, and we're thinking, well, we've got to get them all out, we've got to get them back. So we finished our sort of broadcasting, and it was huge news, as you remember. At the time, I still thought, well, this will never come to Britain. This is an Italy issue, or maybe a mainland Europe issue, and the rest, of course, is history. But we flew back, and then we had to go into lockdown at home, into self-isolation. So I think I must have been amongst the very first people to be told they weren't allowed to leave their homes. So I think we were locked down for about a week before we were allowed back into the back into the office. And of course, covering the news, I had to go to work every day. That's what I did. But we had lots of rules and regulations for reporters out on the road and all the rest of it. And it was all very, very difficult, as we all know. And then when things lifted, I did something very interesting. And you may have done this as well, Michelle, but you remember when the A380s came out of storage and they started flying again, British Airways started taking them on that short hop to Madrid to refamiliarize everybody with the route. So me and my son, we've talked about him being a plane buff as well, thought, well, we'll do this. So we got Club Europe seats, and we sat on an A380 and flew to Madrid, and we had a lovely weekend in Madrid. But and it was such a surreal experience, sitting in the proper business class seat, even for that tiny short hop to Madrid. And there were lots of people doing the same thing. Lots of your followers, I'm sure, were doing the same thing, because the cabin crew were giving people tours of the plane. And we went upstairs, and we were only downstairs was being used, and the upstairs was completely empty. So we were stood upstairs, 30,000 feet in the sky on this huge plane, and the upstairs was completely empty. And no one will ever experience that again, walking up and down a completely empty top deck of an A380 in the sky. So that was quite an experience. And then my only other sort of aviation experience during the whole pandemic was when I decided to cycle around Heathrow. When we were in lockdown, you were allowed your time out to exercise. So I got out my bike and I cycled around the whole of the perimeter of Heathrow, because I just wanted to see all the planes there, not taking off or landing. And it was the most surreal thing. I'm so used to every minute and a half or whatever it is, the planes going over, for the skies to be quiet and for all these planes to be parked up, not going anywhere. I actually found it a little bit emotional. It's weird.
Yeah, I did something similar. Because I was living down on the south coast at the time, and I went down to Bournemouth, where British Airways had flown a lot of their aircraft in to be stored, because they've got a really long runway there and plenty of space. And that was very surreal. You kind of driving around it once we were allowed out, obviously, and just thinking, are these planes ever going to fly again? It was very, very odd.
Yeah, really strange times. Even talking about it now, it seems sort of surreal, doesn't it?
It does. Everybody says that. It was only 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, but it just doesn't seem like it ever happened, because it was just so out of the ordinary, and something hopefully we'll never experience again in our lifetime.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Well, thank you for joining me today, Jonathan. It's been great chatting to you.
No, thank you, and thank you for all the work you do. Helping us all save money and still manage to get some great trips. It's much appreciated. Thanks, Michelle.
Well, I don't know about you, but I found Jonathan absolutely fascinating. Next week, I'll actually be reporting from Cape Town itself, or the Winelands. I'll be telling you all about how to get there using your points and miles, and what to do whilst you're there. Until then, happy travels.